Ben Franklin said those who are willing to sacrifice essential liberty for a little temporary safety deserve neither. Hi, Scott Horton here for the Bill of Rights Security Edition from SecurityEdition.com. It's a playing card-sized steel Bill of Rights designed to set off the metal detectors anywhere the police state goes, so you can remind those around you the freedoms we've lost. And for a limited time, get free shipping when you purchase a frequent flyer pack of 5 Bill of Rights Security Edition cards. Play a leading role in the security theater with a Bill of Rights Security Edition from SecurityEdition.com. The Scott Horton Show is brought to you by the Future Freedom Foundation at FFF.org. Join the great Jacob Hornberger and some of the best writers in the libertarian movement like James Bovard, Sheldon Richman, Anthony Gregory, Wendy McElroy, and more for a real individualist take on the most important matters of peace, liberty, and prosperity in our society. That's the Future Freedom Foundation at FFF.org. Hey everybody, Scott Horton here. Ever think maybe your group should hire me to give a speech? Well, maybe you should. I've got a few good ones to choose from, including how to end the war on terror, the case against war with Iran, central banking and war, Uncle Sam and the Arab Spring, the ongoing war on civil liberties, and of course, why everything in the world is Woodrow Wilson's fault. But I'm happy to talk about just about anything else you've ever heard me cover on the show as well. So check out youtube.com/Scott Horton Show for some examples, and email scott@scotthorton.org for more details. See you there. Hey everybody, Scott Horton here for LibertyStickers.com. If you're like me, then you're right all the time, surrounded by people in desperate need of correction. Well, we can't all have a radio show, but we can all get anti-government propaganda to stick on the back of our trucks. Check out LibertyStickers.com. Categories include anti-war, empire, police state, libertarian, Ron Paul, gun rights, founders quotes, and of course the stupid election. That's LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. All right, you guys don't want to talk about the election. Neither do I. Let's talk about something important, something that, as best I can tell, be unchanged by the election, no matter which way it went, and that's the permanent war on terror. Cheney's grim vision, as I think it was the Seattle Times called it back in 2001. Our guest is Philip Giraldi, also from the American Conservative magazine, like our previous guest, Bill Lind. He's the executive director of the Council for the National Interest, which sponsors this show. And, of course, he writes a regular column for Antiwar.com. Welcome back, Phil. How's it going?
I'm fine, Scott. How about you?
I'm doing good. Appreciate you joining us today. So, what I want to ask you about, since I don't want to talk about really Barack Obama or Mitt Romney necessarily, but I do kind of want to take the occasion of the presidential election yesterday and the re-election of President Obama to kind of do a little bit of a review of the terror war so far, 11 years in, and where we're headed, that kind of thing. I posted on my Facebook page, Obama Karzai 2024, because that's the deal that they signed. And I just wonder, I don't know, what's a former CIA officer, counterterrorism officer like yourself think of all this? Didn't you tell me you were at CIA headquarters on September 11th?
Yeah, I was. Mm-hmm. Right. And there was a panic like you wouldn't have believed.
America's finest and bravest, right?
Yeah, everybody was pouring out of the building to get into the parking lot. So it was fun to watch.
All right. So, and now, look, I'm living in the same world as you, and I'm pretty sure you've been looking at the slowest, motionless train wreck ever unfolding before your very eyes, pretty much the same way I had this whole time. And I mean, it was that night, really, that they announced that, yeah, never mind Al-Qaeda. We're going to use this opportunity to go to war with whoever we feel like. World, watch out.
Yeah. Well, that eventually evolved into the Cheney, 1% solution, which was that any threat out there that's even 1% credible had to be met with a military response, and that's where that's where we've gotten where we are today.
Yeah. All right. Well, so now as far as the war in Afghanistan. I don't know, say somebody reasonable had been in power, magically, and they had hired someone like you or someone else reasonable to advise them on what actually ought to be done. How different would that thing have worked? I mean, would you still have gone for a regime change in Kabul against the Taliban, or would you have just limited the war to Zawahiri and Bin Laden, or what's the deal there?
Well, I mean, you know, it's again one of these things that's kind of complicated, and there are a lot of what ifs. There clearly is evidence from the Swiss embassy that the Taliban were making overtures to the United States to come up with some kind of evidence that that Osama bin Laden had actually been behind 9/11, and they were willing to give him up. And, of course, the United States has never been able to make any kind of reasonable case that he was involved with it. So, you know, if we had somehow managed to cobble together even a vaguely plausible case, probably none of the invasion or the consequences would have happened. Now, you know, ratcheting ahead in terms of what happened and didn't happen, clearly we had an interest in using military force in Afghanistan to remove Al-Qaeda. There's no question about it. But the problem becomes with, you know, the aftermath of that. The aftermath of that, there was no plan, there was no end game, there was no way to get out of this thing, and instead of doing anything sensible, all they've done is stay there for an extra 11 years, and we've gained nothing whatsoever out of it.
Yeah, and of course, and you know, I got the very best version of this audio that I think anybody's ever gotten. It was on TV just the other night. It's a clip of Richard Clarke, he's told the same story many, many times, but this is the clearest version of it ever, where the day of September 11th, before anyone in America could have really been 100% certain the attack was even over, right? The guys on the National Security Council and throughout the White House and the Pentagon were talking about Iraq, and we got to figure out a way to blame Saddam Hussein for this. And they weren't even interested even in going to Afghanistan at all. Apparently, Colin Powell had to cry and beg them to, come on, you got to at least hit Afghanistan first, or the world just isn't going to understand what the hell are you doing, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know, obviously the whole discussion of doing something about Iraq started as soon as the Bush administration came in, way before 9/11. So this was kind of on the back burner. This was a neocon policy right from the beginning, because Iraq was seen as a destabilizing force in the region, as a country that was supporting the Palestinians, that was supporting terrorism, you know, that kind of thing. It was the usual rhetoric that we are now hearing about Iran. I don't know. Sometimes these things never go away. I mean, one thing that came out of yesterday's election is I am amazingly relieved that the neocons hopefully are gone forever now. I mean, I assume they're still going to be hanging around the fringes of the Republican Party, but the fact is what they represent and everything has finally been, I think, put to rest.
Well, I sure hope that's right. I mean, they're discrediting. These are the people who denounced Ronald Reagan for surrendering to the commies in 1989. I mean, they're undiscreditable, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Well, they're getting older now, so maybe they'll just disappear one at a time. I mean, that's really, you know, scary stuff. I thought I'd feel a lot better today with Mitt Romney losing, but actually I don't, because I started thinking again about all the terrible things that Obama's been doing, and I think that we in the anti-war community have to really focus on keeping the light on these issues, and things like targeted killing and assassination of American citizens, the use of drones in general, the hostility that we've been cranking up against countries like Russia and China and Iran. I mean, there are so many issues that Obama could have been a lot better, and we have to hope that now that he's not worried about being reelected, he actually will do some things that are good for the country. Yeah, well, you know, who was it just a minute ago was saying, well, you know, there's the midterms of 2006.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there's always an excuse. Yeah, I think it was Bill Lynn said that at the beginning of the show. They'll always have an excuse. But, yeah, you know, I mean, look at right now in Iraq, you have Sunni Iraqistan or whatever it's called now, that the country's more or less been divided. I mean, don't the Sunni-dominated provinces of Iraq sort of have autonomy the same way the Kurds do at this point from the Shiite government that rules between Baghdad and Basra? And then aren't they now just exporting jihadists to fight on the same side as America? and the same side as Zawahiri against Bashar al-Assad in Syria. I mean, what in the hell? This is where my imagination of how power works in D.C. starts breaking down a little bit. Usually I'm pretty good at imagining a conversation at the National Security Council or something. But how in the hell did they fight a war directly for al-Qaeda in Syria and then even discuss it among themselves? I mean, somebody's got to be keeping a record of some of these conversations, right? How are they doing this?
Well, I agree with you 100%. And what astonishes me is that probably if you look back on the archives of your show, we were probably talking about these issues 5 and 6 months ago. And why does it take the National Security Council with a whole lot more information and a whole lot of really smart people, self-defined, of course, why can't they come up with this stuff that you and I could figure out a long time ago, that this is the way it was going to go? And yet they don't seem to get the message, and it's just absolutely astonishing that this can happen over and over and over again. And the one again ray of light I see on this, it's clear, I think, that from Hillary Clinton's idiotic comments last week and also from some of the stuff coming out of the White House, that they've gotten very goosey about Syria. They realize it's going south already, and maybe after Libya and after Syria and after maybe another horrible example, God knows where, Mali, they'll start to figure these things out. But there's no room for optimism on this because they don't seem to have a learning curve.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, I'm disappointed, really. I mean, I never trusted Hillary Clinton's motives ever or her judgment really at all. But she seems like a smart lady. I can't help but think back to at least how well briefed she was and how well she understood her briefings before her Senate confirmation hearings for Secretary of State. And she's one really sharp broad. She knows a whole lot about a whole lot of stuff. And then she does things like fight against Commie Gaddafi for the jihadists in Libya. What? And then as soon as they're done winning, she exports some of them to go fight a jihad in Syria? I mean, okay, I know you like Benjamin Netanyahu a lot, and so therefore you dislike Bashar al-Assad, but come on, man. I mean, this is going to be a real problem, this whole, deliberately importing jihadists from Iraq into Syria especially, and from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, I mean, but the whole suggestion last week that the political council that runs the Syrian Free Army or Free Syrian Army should be revamped, and we Americans will pick out the people to replace them. That was going to go over well with the Russians and with everybody else. It's just we seem to live in a cocoon that's shaped by our own hubris about what we think we can get away with. But this window's been closing for a long time, and nobody's buying into this stuff anymore.
Yeah, well, on the other hand, though, they don't really need to, right? I mean, they can just keep failing and following their failure hither and yon. I mean, it really does work perfully. It's just like saying, it's like 1984. They can always claim that defeat is victory, and there's no lie that's too big for them to be able to exploit. Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just like saying, hey, if we don't bail out the banks, the economy will suffer. But wait, the economy's suffering because you bailed out the banks last time. I mean, that's where the bubble came from. All that new funny money to prop up all these ailing old institutions is what created the bubble that created the crisis this time. But, oh well, doesn't matter. History began yesterday. We got to do it, or else something bad will happen.
Well, we need the Bain Capital solution, which is basically to put everybody out of business and give money directly to the people that are running the government.
Right. And then, who needs trade? We'll just all get food and water from the National Guard when they come by our neighborhood watch at the, every evening or whatever. Get our rations.
Yeah. It's a strange world, I tell you. It's when you think about the choices that Americans have in terms of their political leadership and how the system has evolved into a virtual oligarchy, which is controlled by a group of insiders who basically transcend the two major political parties. They are the ones that are important, and these people keep getting richer and richer and more powerful, and creating laws and systems that benefit themselves, and the rest of the people get screwed. But the American people can't quite figure it out yet. Maybe it'll happen in our lifetimes. I hope so.
Now, here's the thing. This whole policy has been so counterproductive, compared to the American people's goals anyway, who, the American people did give permission to George Bush to go kill Bin Laden and his friends, please, or whatever. That was the one mandate that they did have, and everything else they've been up to has been so contrary to that. And yet, I thought the New York Times actually, and for the first time ever, as far as I know, did a really good job on this issue the other day where they said, there's more and more movements around the world, especially, of course, in Africa and in the Middle East, where people sort of believe like Bin Laden do. But the one thing that they don't have in common, the one thing that really made Bin Laden and Zawahiri's project unique was that they wanted to attack the United States because they said we're not going to be able to win any of our local revolutions until we win the big one against the empire that's propping up all of our local kings and that kind of thing. And so, but none of the rest of them ever believed that. The rest of them all just still wanted to fight the King of Jordan or fight Hosni Mubarak or fight Saleh in Yemen or fight whatever. So, in other words, it was the New York Times was actually sort of saying, well, geez, it really doesn't matter to us if Al-Qaeda-ish dudes take over North Mali because so what? Like Mali's direct access to New York City or something.
Right, that's exactly right. And that's the key to this whole thing, this whole war on terror. It's basically what you have, even though they would deny it, is you've had the United States government since 2001 declaring war on all Islamists. I mean, Islamist is a very elastic definition. It's basically someone who's a religious Muslim and who is involved somehow in politics. So that's an Islamist. But the reality is that, all Islamists are not basically radicals. I mean, they're just believers in many cases. And even the ones that are radicals, very, very few of them are actually something like terrorists that threaten the United States. So we've declared war on a whole huge category of people. And really, there's only a tiny sliver of this within this category that are people that really we should be worrying about.
Yeah, well, and, if our government really did have the motive of trying to diffuse all this sentiment against us, it would seem like they would want to stop setting people on fire and then screaming at their dying corpses that this is the American way,
Yeah. They really don't. They really don't have a clue, and that's what bothers me about all this. I don't know whether it's just hubris or if it's just are they getting such bad advice? I mean, I can't even figure it out. I mean, why are these decisions and why are these thought processes always so bad and always so wrong? It's a mystery. You and I could sit down and figure out these things a lot faster than they can.
I think a big part of it just would be having to admit how full of it they've been all this time, I mean, when you...
Well, I could see that if I were a Republican. But, I mean, Obama, well, of course, Obama has adopted the Republican agenda, and he had a chance to break from it, but I guess he didn't have the nerve or wasn't convinced enough that he could do it. I don't know what it was, but now with his second term, you're right. He's going to be looking over his shoulder for midterms, no question about it. But he certainly is in a position to maybe take some even baby steps in the right direction. I don't know if you saw, there was an article somewhat joking the other day where somebody suggested that when Hillary Clinton leaves as Secretary of State, the great move would be for Barack Obama to immediately appoint Chas Freeman as Secretary of State.
Oh, man, wouldn't that be great?
I thought that was tremendous.
For people who aren't aware, this guy Freeman, he was sort of a civil servant, intelligence officer type, Phil. You may know his bio exactly, but he was nominated to be the chair of the National Intelligence Council, which is very important. This is where all the intelligence agencies come together to agree to lie us into war or not to, I guess. And he was going to tell the truth. And so the neocons sabotaged the hell out of him, and Obama basically forced him to withdraw his own nomination, right, a couple years back.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this guy is as experienced a diplomat and intelligence expert as you're ever going to find. He was an ambassador to Saudi Arabia. He's an expert on China. He speaks a number of languages. I mean, the guy's brilliant. And if you've ever heard him speak, he's compelling even as a speaker. And he was basically torpedoed because they didn't want an independent voice or somebody who would speak the truth in the corridors of power.
Yeah, well, I am not expecting Obama to do anything brave. And in fact, even as far as these talks, which they've announced they want to have talks and resolve the pretended Iranian issue, I don't expect things to change from, the fall of 2009 or the spring of 2010 where they pretended like they wanted to make a deal, but they didn't want to make a deal. They were just pretending. And in fact, the Iranians are like, okay, we'll do it. And then Obama's like, no, I refuse to accept your acceptance of my offer. Get out of my face.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Yep.
It's amazing, isn't it? But, hey, they get right away with it. But, I don't know. I mean, I guess I hold out some hope. At least it ain't Romney. That's all I can say. I'm not the slightest bit pleased that it's Obama. But like you were saying, the neoconservatives, not only did they take a hit in this thing, it's really more than that. They didn't get the massive promotion that they were possibly going to get. And, I mean, just imagine to have, the next Doug Feith as the Deputy Secretary of Defense for Policy and repeating the whole first 4 years of George Bush Jr. kind of a thing. I prefer the stale old crew that nobody likes anymore to a fresh-faced team of neoconservative lunatics in charge.
Yeah, and plus there are some interesting signs within the Obama administration in terms of how they have more or less figured out that the humanitarian interventionism is not working quite the way it should be working. So some of the voices in the administration that have been supporting that kind of thing have been somewhat muted. And I think there is a reluctance on the part of Obama to get into these things to a certain extent because they don't work, and it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. So hopefully there are some little shifts that are going to take place, and I would like to see some big shifts, but I guess we'll just have to hope for that.
Yep. All right. Now, as far as, somebody's willing to blow himself up in a truck bomb here in the States, we have seen sort of a half-assed attempt in the Detroit attack and again in Faisal Shahzad in 2010 who tried to blow up Times Square. I think that one especially was just a matter of luck, right? That whoever it was trained him how to make that bomb. They just didn't do a good enough job. He wasn't capable of pulling it off. But if we just imagine and pretend it had been a decent enough, decently made thing, it could have killed, I don't know, tens or hundreds of people. It would have been a history-changing thing, not necessarily September 11th size, but it could have been huge for, further effects on our liberty, that kind of thing here at home, for even, maybe justifying a strike against Iran or whoever they want to point their finger at, if they can frame up whichever enemy they feel like attacking best or whatever. So I wonder, what you think is the danger. After all, the U.S. has been killing people nonstop in the Middle East for a long time now and making more and more enemies. That's what even McChrystal says. Every time we kill somebody, we create 10 more enemies. How many of these guys are actually going to be willing to come to the United States and, try again to do September 11th type attacks against American civilians, do you think?
Well, I mean, that's a tough one to answer, of course. I mean, there can always be people that are willing to do that, but I would argue that there are very few of them, and even fewer of them that have any capability actually to do it. And bear in mind, I mean, the attack at Times Square, what did he say? He said that he was doing it out of revenge for the fact that his family was being attacked by drones in Pakistan. So you always have to look to the ultimate cause of when you're being attacked, when you're being victimized, in a way, how did this start? Where does it come from? And the United States basically is in a position now where it is, as you note, creating more enemies than it's succeeding in killing, and it's doing that because it's discovered the wrong solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is not drone warfare, is not supporting corrupt regimes in various places. There are other ways for the United States to deal with these issues, and we've never even tried them in the last 10 years, certainly.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to kind of skate this fine line where these guys in, Syria or Libya, down in Mali, maybe they're Al-Qaeda enough where I can accuse Obama and Clinton of backing these Al-Qaeda-like guys, but then again, they're not Al-Qaeda enough that I think that's an excuse to war against them either. Is that possible? Can I have that? That it's horrible and hypocritical that they support the Mujahideen, but I'm not saying they should fight them. I'm just saying call it off.
Well, Mitt Romney was claiming that Obama was supporting terrorists. I mean, it's like all this stuff is a question of how you want to distort the reality of what you're seeing. And
in Syria, we're on the side of the suicide bombers there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That must be the case. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. I mean, Mitt Romney, we weren't going to talk about the election, but Mitt Romney was so ignorant of anything having to do with anything in the world that it was astonishing that he could even pretend. I mean, he couldn't even get the words right when he was trying to explain things or even get the geography right of places that he was talking about. I mean, are we doomed, to have nothing but idiots running for president? What has happened to this country?
Yeah, that was really something, especially watching Romney. And even the New York Times called him out for this. We're like, yeah, Romney mentioned Mali 3 times in the debate last night. We're pretty sure that was just something big and bold in a heading in his morning briefing, that he still has no idea where it is, doesn't know the first thing about it. And his criticism of Obama on Mali is that he's backing Sunni radicals there, but that he's not doing, in the same breath, he's not doing enough to back the Sunni radicals in Syria. And in fact, the same breath, he's allowed the Sunni radicals that he fought for in Libya to attack him in Libya.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, it's a case of if you assume that every Muslim in the world is out to get us, then you can make a case for anything you want.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Hey, thanks, Phil. I really appreciate talking with you as always.
Okay, Scott. Take care.
All right, everybody, that's Phil Giraldi from the Council for the National Interest, councilforthenationalinterest.org, the American Conservative Magazine, and Antiwar.com. See y'all Friday.
Hey, folks, Scott Horton here for Veterans for Peace at veteransforpeace.org. I'm not a vet, but if you are, I'd like to ask you to consider joining Veterans for Peace. As you know, in matters of foreign wars, a veteran's voice is given much more weight. Well, Veterans for Peace is making veterans' voices heard in ways and places where they can really make a difference. There are more than 175 chapters of Veterans for Peace in all 50 states, working hard to eliminate nuclear weapons, seek justice for veterans and victims of war, and abolish war as an instrument of American national policy. It's the Peace Vets versus the Chicken Hawks. Join up the good fight at veteransforpeace.org. Hey y'all, Scott Horton here. After the show, you should check out one of my sponsors, wallstreetwindow.com. It's a financial blog written by Mike Swanson, a former hedge fund manager who's investing in commodities, mining stocks, and European markets. Mike's site, wallstreetwindow.com, is unique in that he shows people what he's really investing in, updating you when he buys or sells in his main account. Mike's betting his positions are going to go up due to the Federal Reserve printing all that money to finance the deficit. See what happens at wallstreetwindow.com. In an empire where Congress knows nothing, the ubiquitous D.C. think tank is all. And the Israel lobby and their neocon allies must own a dozen. Well, Americans have a lobby in Washington, too. It's called the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. They advocate for us on Capitol Hill. Join CNI to demand an end to the U.S.-sponsored occupation of the Palestinians and an end to our government's destructive empire in the Middle East. That's the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. Hey ladies, Scott Horton here. If you would like truly youthful, healthy, and healthy-looking skin, there is one very special company you need to visit, Dagny & Lane at dagnyandlane.com. Dagny & Lane has revolutionized the industry with a full line of products made from organic and all-natural ingredients that penetrate deeply with nutrient-rich ionic minerals and antioxidants for healthy and beautiful skin. That's Dagny & Lane at dagnyandlane.com. And for a limited time, add promo code SCOTT15 at checkout for a 15% discount.